Good evening, everybody. It's been a little while. Sorry if I shocked you. I'm very excited. Yeah, it's a well-read review. Hide your children. So get ready to take a very deep and sound nap. Um, we're talking about a pretty institutional book tonight, actually. So this book got a lot of buzz, and the creator, people love him. He played the YouTube game just right, and he built up a fan following. He has a brand. He knew exactly the market that he wanted to appeal to. So he put out a book. He's very, very grounded in the 90s. And his character for this main title, Reaper Destroyer, is very inspired by a lot of 90s properties. So there's been a lot of buildup, a lot of excitement to finally get this book out and to get it into people's hands and to see exactly what this is all about. Joe Sontag has been driving this 90s revival force over on his channel, and he does regular reviews of Spawn. They're an awesome watch. You guys should check it out. But he definitely he knew his customer base, played to him really hard. So we're going to be talking about that today. How successful was Joe in reviving the spirit of the 90s in Reaper Destroyer? Look forward to that, guys. And yeah, look forward to another well-read review. You know what that means, right? It means that we have a panel, unfortunately. We should do these without the panel. I'll just sit here and blather on by myself, never talk about the book because I don't actually read them, and just end the stream. I think that's the perfect way to do these shows. We got Wyatt Eastman popping up in the chat. Thank you for joining us. It's great to see somebody who's first, unlike this guy who's last. You know what second is, right? Bancroft. It's the first one last. So there you go. He says, "What up, though? What up to you? Thanks for being here." Blah blah blah. Get on with it. Yeah. keep your horses tamed. There, Mike Miller. Mike Miller joining the panel today. Michael Bancroft too. I'm being struggle sessioned in the back. We're gonna have to free the ducks. Yeah. It's time to free the ducks, guys. We're gonna have some duck anarchy on the streams. I think we need to have a little bit of duck cancellation. Actually, this whole thing was a big gay op to set up Alasman, who's going to be the real focus of scrutiny for the entire stream. He's got a lot of things to answer for, so get ready for that. Put your ball gag back in. I don't know what's going on in the back. All right, guys. Let's get this thing rolling. We got Junk in the chat. He's already ready for duck blood. He smells it in the water. We got Praetor. He says hello. Yeah, the comic fans are here. This is pretty cool, actually. Praetor's got a little bit of Dan Fraga artwork in his avatar. So everybody knows Dan Fraga. He's back on the horse. He's drawing again, Black Flag. Speaking of the 90s and revivals. So we're expecting that book really soon. Everybody should be excited for it. And Fraga is working hard after overcoming a few health scares that he's had over the past year. So don't worry about the delay. Your book is coming. And it's going to be all 90s goodness from here on out, guys. From here on out. We got Victor. Says about time. Yeah, I know. I left you guys wanting for more. I left exactly at the peak. I followed my idol Seinfeld, and then I came back and sold out for a big paycheck. So that's how this goes. Paulus Arts, ready for duck meat. All right. Linkovich is happy to have well-read reviews back. So I'm glad to see that. All right. Chat's all warmed up, ready to go, guys. Let's bring on the panel. Who do we have here? Let's bring on the main course. Let's start with the mains. All right. We've got this this morsel all plated, juicy, ready to go. Let's carve them up. The last man.
You only played 1 minute of music. That was your best part of the streams. You shortened it to 1 minute. Are you insane?
I am insane. Actually, long intros are out. I don't know if you know that, Elasmic. People are tired of them.
In what universe?
In this one. Get with the times. It's 2025, right?
I'm trying to help you. I really am, but you're making it harder for me to defend you.
You're dated, Elasmat.
You tagged me on Twitter. I still fault you for that.
Speaking of dated, let's bring on another 90s remnant, a dated commodity. That's always feels new when you bring him on. Micus Miller.
I hated the 90s.
You hated the 90s? The 90s made you.
The 90s made me.
Yeah. Extreme
What?
Studios, that whole deal, Image.
Extreme Wildstorm.
Wildstorm.
Dude.
Whatever.
Wow, this guy. Do your homework.
You merely adopted the 90s, but we were born in them.
I was flipping. I was in my 20s all through the 90s.
All through the 90s, you were 20. That sounds accurate.
I was in my 20s all through the 90s.
Gotcha.
What are you, deaf? Are you deaf, lad?
Well, speaking of people in their 20s, let's bring on our panel's millennial representation here. Michael Bancroft.
I fall on the cusp, well read. I am a Zennial. So depending on who you ask, I'm a Gen Xer or I'm a millennial. But I don't feel like I'm either because I was born in 1980.
1980.
See, the 2000s were to him what the 90s were to me.
Mm.
Yeah. I remember I grew up without computers and mobile phones and all that sort of stuff and the internet. So I had the childhood of a Gen Xer, but the kind of teenage and adult years of a millennial. So we're the forgotten generation. 1980 to 1983. We don't fit into any box.
I mean, it just means you guys didn't have cell phones, right? That's
right before the millennial generation.
Yeah, we didn't get cell phones until we were already,
teenagers.
Maybe 19.
You guys were the generation of the poors. So,
well, yeah.
No,
absolutely.
they were rich in outdoor activities.
Losers. That's all.
Rollerblading.
Woo! Let's get going. Some blading. Let's talk about some Reaper blading. I wonder if Reaper Destroyer could rollerblade. It's an interesting question to ponder.
90s character.
Yeah, he's got to be into rollerblading.
He doesn't really have a rollerblader's physique, though.
No. Yeah, he's not slender or anything. He's kind of like a hockey player, actually.
I don't think he needs rollerblades. This is not the conversation we should be having.
Looks like a goalie.
I thought this was a well-read review stream where
never mind.
Meander.
I just noticed what his belt buckle looks like. You remember those really old scissors that were just like forged out of one piece of iron and right, like medieval scissors.
Oh my goodness! Turn of the century.
You know what I'm talking about?
No.
I know. Yeah, they're like shearers. I know exactly.
Yeah.
Is this 1910?
Ooh, and it's pointed right at his crotch. That's terrible.
It just means he's well groomed down there.
Exactly. It's got a Brazilian. So.
This stream took a turn.
All right, all on his own, Joe Sontag was able to nab 1,292 backers and 75K, which is not too shabby. They didn't have a lot of promotion, all based on word of mouth and his reputation and his brand. So I think that's pretty respectable. He knew exactly where his market was, and he focused in on it. He honed in and exploited them for every cent that they're worth.
Not to toot my own horn, but this is probably the peak of the Bancroft bump. When this launched, Joe did absolutely everything you could do as a unknown entity. He'd already started a channel, and he'd been getting around on all the shows and everything. And I actually use the template that he used on Twitter and YouTube as the build-up of buzz. Because he created just such a fervent energy around the launch of this book that when it went live, we went live, we did an hour show. I spent the entire hour just reading out backer numbers. It was glorious. It was just, they just kept coming and coming. I think within an hour, it was into the hundreds. And then he jumped over onto Jeremy Ice and Fire's channel, and they kept going. And I think they ended up raising 26,000 from hundreds and hundreds of backers that first night. It was
That's
crazy.
awesome.
Yeah,
That is
so
awesome.
it was like he did everything that you can do as an unknown to build buzz surrounding this book.
It was a marketing genius. Did he tap into the fervor and the excitement of the 90s? Was there a bit of that?
He tapped into the definitely the nostalgia and the kind of people, like a lot of people who were into the 90s, they kind of wish they were being catered to more. And you know, they're laughed at by today's modern corporate comic scene as like, oh, that's, you know, that's not really worth anything. We've evolved since then. This is all style and no substance. Which, I mean, you can make an argument here and there about that, but yeah, there's definitely a crowd that want this sort of comic and they're not being served.
Yeah, Rob Liefeld posted that the 90s investor, comic reading investor, would save comic books because they would come back into the LCS and they would buy multiple copies of books once again. And all they needed to have is that 90s sentiment cater to them once again. And they would put down money to get it.
I don't know about that.
I don't know if that helped comics or hurt them in the long run. There's probably an argument either way, but there's definitely
all of those people still have 12 copies of Spawn and 20 copies of X-Men #1 that they can't move.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, the Spawns are worth a lot.
I wouldn't say they're worth a lot.
Yeah, well,
if you got one of the rare ones, but I mean, everyone has a Spawn #1.
I have 9 of them.
The ones with the UPC codes, they're valuable. Anyway,
I guess if you can get like a 9.8, getting them graded, they're worth a couple $100 or something.
I think what's more people are missing is just that balls to the wall, crazy energy, and just ludicrous art that came about from that Image split and a lot of the smaller studios that were bouncing around at that time. That just people really. That's a lot of people, especially my age's first introduction to comic books was that era.
Yeah,
and that's kind of now you do get a lot of really nice art in the mainstream. It's all kind of a bit house style, and then you also get a lot of stuff that is derived from kind of simple Cal Arts almost.
You are conspicuously quiet. Alas, Matt, did you not know anything about the 90s?
Are you trying to say conspicuously?
Conspicuously.
He did use a big word. I feel attacked now. Like, know who you're talking to. Use the small, simple words of less than 2 syllables, please. I appreciate that. But to answer your question, well read, the whole 90s thing. When I was reading the book, I got visions of Spawn and Venom. Those were the two that immediately popped up as I was reading it. But other than that, like, I didn't, and maybe it's just me, but I am kind of critical of the 90s because I was never a big fan of that style. But of course, now looking back on it, I'd rather have that style than what's out there today. But I can see, like, if you are a fan of the 90s, then the art in this book would definitely appeal to you. So I definitely see that case for that. And as well as, like, I mentioned Spawn and Venom as 2 IPs that stood out to me as I was reading the story. And other things were popping out as well.
So is that the sole selling point of this book, that it's an art piece meant to be a visual feast, a spectacle, without a lot of substance? Does it embody that characteristic of the 90s?
Yes.
Joe himself would say he's about the art. That's what comics are to him. Just that rad, crazy. It's very, art that appeals to boys aged 12 to early 20s or so. I would say that's what he's most into. So I don't think it depends on how you say it. Like, some people might say, oh, this is all just about the art in a kind of snooty way as a bad thing, or you could say, man, this comic is all about the art and be like, yeah, so like it depends on where you're coming to. whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. Does it embody that? Yeah, to a certain degree, but I feel like he does definitely make a solid go at trying to build the mythos around what he's doing here. But you can tell from a page like that, you know what sort of comic book you're reading. This is a very visual story, essentially.
I see a lot of dialogue, though.
There is.
Well, yeah, well, that panel in particular. So, I mean, I can go into a little bit on the characters. So, this is where we bring up the whole Venom inspiration, where you have the guy Matt, and you have the other character Apophis, who's an entity that possesses these beings called Elder Sons, and they're possessing the same body. So what you see here is dialogue between the two of them within the body as they're fighting off these creatures. So when you understand, like noticing the color of the fonts, that it's actually a conversation between two entities in the same body, then it becomes easier to understand.
Is it easy for you to give us a synopsis on the book, Elasmat? How would you summarize?
I would summarize as two beings possessing a body, trying to fight off these creatures, these Del Mortes, and a subplot involving the Elder Sons, one of them being Victor, who wants to bring back a demoness by the name of Vanessa, who wants to take over the world of man. So it's really external action as well as the internal struggle between these two entities inhabiting this body, this suit of armor.
Mm.
And to Cross point, there is a mythos buildup. There is some lore dump, but it's not as obnoxious as it was with Godlike. There's actually a balance of giving some information with some visuals. So I was okay. Yeah. It's not tedious. So there's that.
I was a little worried of the first 4 or 5 pages because there was a lot of text in that, and I did feel like, okay, we're getting a bit of a dump here of exposition, and I mean, it's handled well enough, through it's in the middle of a fight and everything and all that sort of stuff, so that's good. But Joe actually very quickly kind of slows things down after that and lets the story breathe a bit more. So it is really just the kind of the first opening panel, but you get such, like Elasmat said, you get a lot of cool art sort of take you through it. This initial thing, but you do kind of need to understand, like what Elasmat said, that there's two entities that are at odds with each other, and one of them clearly doesn't know as much as the other does.
So it establishes the conflict very immediately, and then it gets to the action just throughout the entire story. I'm guessing it doesn't explore that a whole lot and look for a resolution, or does it get deeper? Like, how surface level does the book stay, or does it get very deep into the character here, Reaper Destroyer?
I think it stays right up there on top. I actually got a lot more out of the supplemental than I did out of the initial story.
That's a common criticism, isn't it? That the supplementals are better than the main books. I wonder why that is.
Well, the first story, the art is better than the main book, but I think it's because you get, when you're in a story, you care about character. And here, I mean, I get the trope of like a character who doesn't know who he is or anything. It's like the Wolverine thing, but it just, you don't get any character out of the main character other than like the conflict, right? It's like
yeah.
Why do I care about this guy?
We don't
know anything.
We don't know. He doesn't even know who he is. So there's no hope that we know who he is at all. And it doesn't. This book doesn't get into it, other than he finds himself in a very interesting situation, being that he's in this suit. But he's not really in any position at this time to do anything about that, other than just stay.
Yeah, I hear that, but that's why I'm saying that I like the supplemental better, because you got into who the characters were in the supplemental.
But I mustn't have got that one.
You didn't catch it?
No. Did I? Was it in that PDF?
There was 2 PDFs.
Oh, sorry, I mustn't have.
I purposely didn't read the supplemental because I wanted to see how much of the story I could get just on the main book. So, I get why people do supplemental stories. I've done my own side stories as well, but I try to put enough information on the main book because I feel like as a reader, you want to be rewarded with the experience on the main book, and the supplemental is more just a means to reward your experience with the first book. So whatever happens in the supplemental, I kind of got enough from the main book, but as was pointed out, I didn't get any emotional connection with Matt. I didn't really connect with him. It was just you're just watching him do things. You're watching him struggle with Apophis and watching these events unfold.
Yeah.
So what is the main book hoping to deliver then? And did it succeed in that goal?
I think the main part of it. I just think it's opening up the story to, like, revealing what the big conflict is. Like, I don't know. Are we spoiling this thing or no?
Yeah. We do spoilers here.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah. Because so it's like you get to the point at the end and you realize that he's actually the demon that's causing all of the problems, or all of the visions of nightmares and all of the stuff that he's like kind of dealing with when he blacks out. Right. And then like at the end, he's like, "Holy crap! It's been you this whole time." And then you're like, "Where do we go?"
All along.
It almost sounds like it would have been great to like introduce that in the beginning and then like explore that throughout the entire story. I don't know. Did you get that sense, or is that just me? I'm drunk, so I don't listen to anything.
I don't know about that. I think it is that you meet all the players, most of them. You get a sense of the kind of story it's going to be, and then it is a lot to sort of take in, and I think, and Joe knows this because he's spoken about it. This works as a story a lot better if it's shorter books at a monthly release, which is sort of like what I know about monthly release, but I know going forward, it's going to be shorter books, quicker released. And I think that's sort of what this story leans towards a lot more because, you get introduced to everyone, but you don't really know what any of them are about. You can sort of gleam, okay, the main bad guy is he's a crazy psychopath who's got these creature women, sirens, and they're, crazy. But you haven't really, you're just sort of peeking behind the curtain at this point. And
it's like he just wanted to come out guns blazing.
Yeah.
Which he does, like when you read the book and you see that action sequence. And that's the thing. There's some decent pacing in the book. It starts off with an action sequence, then you get some expository information, some lore dump, then back to action sequences, and then something is revealed about the main character, and then the book ends. There's it's definitely guns blazing, but like Bancroft's saying is if he's releasing the next stories like in a periodical fashion, then then you can definitely invest emotionally in the book because like I said, I felt like I didn't really connect with Matt.
Well, you just in that sort of kind of like what say take Spawn for example. You get things piecemeal. You get them bit by bit as you go. But really, what the book is check out this friggin' awesome splash page of the Violator.
Oh yeah.
That's like rad. You're like, oh my god, look at all this stuff. Like that's what this is leaning more towards, and you get that in this book. You get a really great sequence of I always slur his name, Apophis, when he takes control, and you see the full extent of Reaper Destroyer's abilities, and he gets the big scythe, and it's this glowing red thing, and it's kicking butt. Like that's really, I think, what Joe wants to leave you with this story. And having listened to Joe for years now, that's kind of where I think he's really focused on.
Well, so does it scratch the 90s itch then? Did he deliver on his promise to his audience? Or does his audience have like higher expectations because they're all matured? And maybe they think they want the 90s, but they don't really want the 90s.
I'm not going to speak for his audience. I can only speak for myself. I knew what I was getting into with this book. Not being a 90s fan, I kind of dipped out in the mid 90s, and I read Spawn up until about issue 30 or so, and I thought, it's cool, but I just left it there.
All right, so let me answer. I'm sorry, go ahead. I know you finished. I'm sorry.
I was just going to finish by saying, yeah, I mean, it delivered what I expected it to. I wasn't really expecting any kind of, deep character, exploration or anything like that. Mm-hmm. I was expecting a friggin' dude in a crazy cape that's all destroyed, hacking things up with a friggin' scythe. And that's, what you get. And to a point, you get some other stuff as well. You get some reveals. Again, it's definitely part of a much longer story, which, for better or worse, in crowdfunding, we have to wait a certain amount of time. Does that work? Doesn't it work? It's up to each individual. For me, I don't mind waiting.
So I was not aware of the story because apparently it was funding during the time when I was dealing with personal issues. So I was kind of like in and out of the scene. So I came in not expecting anything. And regarding the 90s nostalgia of it, I mean, I didn't get nostalgic for it, but I definitely got that 90s vibe simply with the character of Matt and his struggle with Apophis. That's where I got that 90s vibe. And then some of the action sequences definitely had that image feel. So from somebody that didn't expect anything, I would say he did succeed with that.
Mm-hmm. Well, so we've referenced a lot of like the, member berries and the 90s nostalgia attribute of what he's trying to accomplish. But what was good about the 90s? So if he's delivering this book to the modern audience, with that 90s flavor, what qualities is he hoping to accentuate other than badass art? You mentioned a lot of world building up front. What things are 90s readers typically looking for? What really gets them juiced up when they're reading a story like Reaper Destroyer? And does it hit those things?
I would say 75% of it is just the art. Like that, I mean, that's I could be completely wrong, but that's my understanding of what made 90s comics what they are. That sort of, Extreme Studios or Image Comics was just like, look at this badass art that we haven't seen before, and these crazy characters with completely over the top designs, and look at that friggin' axe, like that is what, in my understanding, and I could be completely wrong, I'm not an expert, is like 75% of it. And then, yeah, you're getting into stuff that's kind of a bit subversive, a little bit naughty, a little bit risque. It's, this is a story that's got demons and sirens, and they're like ripping guys apart after they sleep with them, and it's it's a lot of that sort of stuff. But it's going to be up to each person, whether or not they think it delivered on that that thing. Like I said, I know who the characters are now. I know the sort of basic premise, but whether or not it's going to be like a really rad story that's going to develop and everything, we don't know that yet, essentially.
So you mentioned you're not an expert on the 90s, but we have an expert on the 90s on the panel, Mike. Chime in. Yeah, but you worked in the 90s. So
I did work in the 90s. And
that was the fire that forged the sword of your pen. So
I'm just straight up. I'm an 80s guy. I grew up, all my love for comics came from the 80s. I broke in the industry in the 90s, and I just was not in love with everything that was going on. I mean, I'm a lot of good art and stuff, but damn it, I had just bins of books because I worked at Image, so I would get all these free Image books, and it's like, great, I just have crate after crate after crate of unreadable crap with really good art. Great. And that, to me, the readability of something, that's what makes it stick out over time. All those, think of all those crappy freaking 90s books. How many of those are you like, damn, I'm going through my 10th reading of that graphic novel or whatever, right? It's like nothing. It's all from the 80s. All the stuff that's rereadable is from the 80s. I mean, okay, you've got some stuff that came out in the 90s, but like, Sin City and Hellboy. None of the Image stuff.
Well, we don't want to go down a direct memory lane. I'm saying put on your professional's cap you're going into work and you're creating 90s style books. How well does Reaper Destroyer hit the aesthetics that you were at one time paid to also deliver to the audience?
I mean, aesthetically, yeah, it feels like a 90s era book, which, you know, obviously I'm not praising, but that's my personal taste. I know there's, you know, people bought millions of these things, so if you're a 90s era fan, yeah, it hits a lot of those key points. It even has the sideways double page spread.
It does.
That actually kind of, that kind of annoyed me a bit.
I was killing my neck until I figured out how to turn it around on my freaking PDF viewer.
Linkovich says not every comic is going to be a masterpiece geared to an adult reader with some stellar writing. Comics are mostly for young boys. Mike,
I disagree. I mean, I agree that not every comic is going to be a masterpiece geared, but that comics are mostly for young boys. I think that's what has hobbled this industry.
Damn, I can't believe I put a hater on the panel of
let's
its own craft.
Hang on, you put a lot of like people who just want to read superhero comics on the Lucent review. So I think it's fine if we have Mike here. You're like, this isn't enough like a superhero comic for me. Now I've lost my train of thought. Damn it.
Comic Mate says every comic I work on is a masterpiece.
Was Reaper Destroyer advertised as a superhero character? Because I didn't come away with from this book alone. I didn't come away with him as a superhero, but I expected, I guess, the math side of Reaper to eventually do good. So, but I didn't.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't come into it either thinking superheroes either. I think a lot of what they were doing was trying to take superhero tropes into new places, and I think Joe is continuing on in that tradition where you've got guys in costumes, you've got evil, we don't really have. I mean, yeah, we don't know Matt yet, but I suspect that's probably where it's headed as well. But yeah, a lot of the same poses, action, a lot of the same beats. Is it a superhero comic? I don't know. I don't really care. Like, it doesn't matter to me what we call it. But yeah, again, I've forgotten where I'm going with this, so I'm just gonna shut up now.
I'm pulling teeth on this panel.
Well, it's going to end up being
to
superhero versus demon, sort of a Spawn, sort of a darkness type of a idiom.
Yeah.
What was good in the 90s that Joe is revitalizing here? And Mike, what things here is Joe doing that would have gotten him a bonus back when you were working in the 90s?
That's a weird question. Well,
where would you get backpacks?
Backpacks?
Yeah,
from Jim Lee.
Backpats from Jim Lee. He'd come into your office. He'd like, man, what's your name again? Mike Miller, Joe Sontag. I don't know. Same difference. You did a great thing by delivering this attribute of your book. You specialized in these aesthetics.
I know. I'm trying to think. I didn't draw like this. I didn't write like this.
All right.
This isn't. I worked for companies, and if I've inked stuff like this, but this was never my kind of milieu. This was like, again, I'm story driven. I know I'm an artist, but I'm story driven.
So to Miller's point, like he was more into the 80s, and that was his inspiration. And Bancroft talked about like the 90s, how it was more like 75% art, and I agree. Like the 90s was really more about art and less about story and writing. I'm not saying that this book was like that, but definitely you could see that there was an appeal to like create dynamic art with the angles, the design of the panels, and the details of the characters, especially during the battle scenes. So there was that.
Yeah, and my Bancroft kind of did put a fine bow on it when he was talking about how, like, people bought books so they could see this. It's not about the story. It's about this cool shot of Violator and blah, 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 and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And that was very much in vogue. And again, I just, even going through it, I couldn't stand it. I'm my whole thing, and it's been my whole thing my entire life through all my professional career, art serves the story. The whole 90s image thing corrupted the concept that art serves story and turned it into story is there to sell your art. And that it's anathema to me.
I don't have that take. I think while the story isn't super deep and it's not really getting into the characters or anything, I mean, I'm just sort of like, all right, we're running a kind of we started an adventure here with this guy who's got this kind of, it's effectively a split personality. We're meeting the villains, and then you're right, it's not super deep, but I wouldn't like, I'm not bringing out words like milieu and anathema to to describe anything here.
Well, and you also didn't read the supplemental. Which
I didn't read the supplemental.
This is why I preferred the supplemental, because there was more story being served in the supplemental than there was in this. And I get it. He's like bang, 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 shooting all cylinders and trying to cram in as much as he can in this first issue. But it's like, I don't know. It's kind of all over the place. Plus, the main character, he sounds just like the main character. Like, both of their personalities sound the same, but one is like a millennials old freaking demon from hell.
I gave
the other one like that Street Mike or Street Matt.
Yeah, sorry. I gave that critique to Joe as well when I first read it. I said, if I could give you one piece of advice in the next books, work more on character voice, because actually I would say all of them, not even just the two guys in the suit, but all of the characters have pretty much the same way of talking.
I thought that too until my second reading, and then I can't remember who it was, but there was one character, one of the females started having a little of her own affect. I think it was the young villainess character. I can't remember her name, but she had a little bit of a affectation to what she was saying. So it's like, that's something. Go ahead.
I was going to say, that's something that is so easy to, work on, that will completely elevate any story, because it's just that sort of, it's that background ambience of storytelling, where it's like, okay, now I feel, even if I'm not really getting into the characters anymore, and we're going to wait for future issues for that to happen, I feel like they're real, and I feel like this is a more lived-in world. It is one of the things I noticed that, especially between, is it Matt and Apophis? They had the same voice, different speech balloons, different colors, different motivations, different things.
Exact same voice. Yeah, and you want this, 10,000-year-old demon god to have like kind of a voice with gravitas and intent, and just like sneering down at this pathetic little human who he has to share a body with, and just kind of have that kind of a dynamic instead of.
I think what would have helped emphasize that is
talking to each other. It's like
making the font size bigger for Apophis would have probably made it would have helped emphasize that. A bigger font size, maybe different style font, to emphasize that this is an inhuman creature that, as Mike would say, is pretty much an overwhelming Matt.
Yeah, but I mean, to me, the words you use, it's the cadence, it's the sentence structure. I think he would, he wouldn't talk like a normal modern human talks.
Right. Also, I thought it was a weird balloon choice for the demon to have the white bubbles and the human to have the black bubbles, but that's just a lettering thing.
So tell me what you think is missing then from the story, Mike, based on your aesthetics, since you revile the 90s and everything they ever stood for. You want everybody who ever worked in that era.
I don't know. It's really hard because I understand putting the difficulty of getting to know a character that doesn't know themselves. Right? That's a very, very difficult Rubik's Cube to solve. Like, how are you going to do that to where you can take that beat, and rather than that beat being, throwing the character into another realm where he's just freaked out again, it's like, something that ingratiates them to the reader, that makes you want to care about the character. I don't know, maybe like, delving into his insecurity about the situation is in, about how, he doesn't know who he is and he wants to know what, I don't know. It just felt like going from, the kettle into the fire and then back and forth. And, it kept it actiony and going and whatnot, but you need that save the cat moment. You need that moment where you care that this is the hero and you care about what happens to him. And there just was too much going on for that to happen.
Yeah, I think aside from just his life, I don't think there was nothing else that Matt could have risked losing that would have helped us relate to him in terms of his own personal battle.
Right.
Yeah, all we know is he's stuck in this situation, which, sure, we can know intellectually that this isn't a good situation, but it's so far removed from anything that any normal person would ever have. So it's not like we can connect with it on any kind of emotional level that we can relate to. None of us, I think, would want to be trapped in a suit, an ancient demon suit with a demon that's like torturing us. But, yes, I think what, Mike, you're alluding to is like some kind of moment that, happens in the story where we can see, okay, this is the good guy that we need to be rooting for, beyond just he's presented as such.
Yep.
Are the elements there for that kind of more substantive narrative?
No.
In future issues, not in this particular one. Like we said, he doesn't really get a moment to stop. We're bouncing from one action sequence to the next. The pacing does sort of like slow down after the initial burst at some point, but not to a degree where we're gonna like get to know him or anything like that. It is very, very much an action focused book.
Yeah, like even when he dies and then goes into that little, or not dies, whatever, he goes in the sword scene where he has that revelation. You don't even really take too much of a breath there. It's just moving to the next, action scene. But when he does disappear the first time, I think that could have been an opportunity to somehow, delve into his personality and try to get a moment. I don't know. I can't think of what I would do, really, because I just keep staring at this page.
To me, I feel like that's what Joe is planning to do in future issues.
Right.
Like that's how I feel like it's being set up.
There is a lot of dialogue though here. I'm surprised that you're saying
it's too much.
Not much story.
Yeah,
it's too much dialogue.
It's not.
It's not surfacing the narrative, essentially.
How do I explain it? It's more about, because there's a lot that's actually happening. There's a lot going on. You get to feel like there's a big sort of world of demons and lore and everything out there, but we're not really. That's like to come. That's part of the story to come that we're feeling. So there's a lot of like discussion back and forth, between, say, for instance, Matt and the demon or whatever that's possessing him, and then there's the bad guy and he's got his things, he's doing his motivation and stuff like that. But yeah, it's not really like I said, it's not a character-driven story at this time. It's very much, this is what it is. This is what's happened. This is where we're going at the moment, and strap in.
Yeah, you know what? This is the movie trailer.
So a lot of focus on externals, and not enough putting the character at the central focus. It sounds like.
Well, you say that, and Mike says that, because Mike, is a fan, and I'm as well, Mike. I love 80s comics probably more than any era. I love that stuff. But like if you bought Reaper Destroyer, which I'm guessing a lot of people did for a Top Cow or whatever image, an early 90s image style book, they probably didn't want a deep character study on who this guy is. They wanted dude fighting tentacle weird guy, with a scythe and some whatever happens, whatever comes about because of that.
Yeah, but whatever the story is, you have to have at least enough time to care about the character, because that's really what you need to get. When you get to the end of a comic book, you need two things. Do I care about this character, and do I care about what happens to him next? Right.
And that goes to my point about we needed to see him risking something, or the fear of risking something other than his life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do I care about Matt? Not yet. No. Could I? Maybe. I'm more interested in Apophis, if that is his name. I don't know how to pronounce it. I'm sorry. Because he seems like a cool kind of badass, crazy thing, and not that I care about him, but he's definitely interesting me. He's piqued my interest, and he does cool things, and I want to see more about what he's all about. Even though he does talk like he was raised in the 90210. But maybe he's just really good at adapting to the time. He's finding himself.
Because Apophis goes from being very snarky and you would think antagonistic, but at some point he seems to be encouraging Matt. And then by the end, it seems like he's accepting Matt's position. So there's definitely something going on with Apophis. That is interesting.
Yeah. That's what that was sort of my main takeaway from it. I didn't really, I'm not as concerned about Matt at the moment, but very much in the same way that initially I didn't really care about Al Simmons either in Spawn. Spawn was cool. He was like he was the thing, and then the Violator, and so that's
do you
that's
care about
that
Eddie Brock, or do you care about Venom?
Yeah, exactly. That's that sequence. So that's Apophis there. That's him taking control, and
Matt, you're gonna like the supplemental. I mean, not Matt, Michael.
All right, I'll definitely. I don't. I didn't read it. Sorry, I didn't.
So tell us, Mike.
Tell
us, Mike. How does the supplemental completely redeem Reaper Destroyer in your eyes?
Well, just because what he's saying here, where it's like he cares more about this character. Well, in the supplemental, you get sort of an origin story of why Apophis is not in hell, or whatever hellscape he's from. He was imprisoned there, and then it's like his little fight and struggle to get out. And it really does just sort of explain more. And I don't know, it's just a better, it's concise. It's got a beginning and a middle and an end, and it explains stuff. So it's like you do get I don't know, it's just a better story structurally, I think.
And you didn't have the structure here in the main story.
This story just kind of, it went all over the place, because you do have two storylines, and then you have them overlap in a weird way with that giant demon who's pretending to be the person from the second storyline. So you never actually have the A and B stories intertwine, but you kind of do through a puppet, not a puppet. What do you call it?
Avatar?
What did he call himself? A mimic.
Yes.
So we don't get to that sort of B story, A-B story crossover. So it just kind of seems like it's two separate stories, but we're just telling them in the same issue, but there's no cohesion.
Plus, it's definitely very much an opening act, this book.
Yes.
It's not there's no conclusions or,
right. So you get the last page of oh man, it's you. And then you're like, oh, okay, now what? So you do have that now what sort of, I kind of care what happens next, but I still don't care about the character.
Yeah, I'm still going to go back to my point, thinking that the now what should have probably happened at the beginning. But I mean, that's just me having not read anything ever in my entire life. Yeah,
so not a good place to start from.
No, but you know, we all got to start somewhere. All right, guys. It sounds like that's the place to start. Final thoughts. What do you think?
We didn't talk about the art.
Oh, we talked about the art. All right, let's talk about the art.
All you talked about the art is just saying it looked like the 90s.
All right, give me something about the art, Mike. Let's hear you say something nice for once.
Well, you just keep showing all the best pages.
Exactly. That's what I'm here for. Say something about the art, Mike. Say something. Be nice for once.
No. Why did you bring me here?
All right, so say something honest for once.
The art in the supplemental is a lot better. Jeez, the first chapter story in the supplemental, the art is like really, really solid. This is like a similar style, but it lacks a lot of the basic structure, especially in the women. His women are almost an afterthought, and they really need. I don't even know who drew it. I know, but you're not showing a woman, so I can't really.
Well, my understanding is Joe is the artist, but there were a ton of different inkers.
Oh,
like 4 or 5 different inkers and 2 or 3 colorists.
Okay, we'll go to some big page with a female figure on it.
All right, let me find a woman for you, Mike. As if you haven't asked for enough on this.
If you need more to find your woman, you're doomed.
Be searching for 100 years. There we go. There's a woman. I believe. You know, not trying to misgender anybody. Give it a minute. My browser is slow. There we go.
Yeah, so like look at this, the arm and I mean, she looks like super thin. These muscles are, I don't know, muscles kind of work,
that's Vanessa, right?
Know, it's just very, very.
That's the one they bring back.
Right.
So if you'd like to learn some art, just hit me up and
You'll learn them.
I'll learn you some stuff. I get that it's like a lot of, I can tell it's 90s inspired, right? I mean, it's got like the Jim Lee rib cage and poses and whatnot. But well, come on, is that not the Jim Lee rib cage?
Yeah, you're exactly right. And that, like, a lot of the times when people will show off these 90s things, and they'll go, "Oh, I love this stuff," and I'm like, I look at it and I go, "Oh, that's unusual." To say the least.
You sicko.
Because I grew up. Well, I mean, anyway, I went back and I the things I liked a lot more are very different to this. So I do see what Mike is saying. The Joe is really good at those basically drawing his character, the Reaper Destroyer, in certain action things and everything like that. But yeah, I can see there's issues on anatomy here pretty plainly, but then again, like people will go like, "Oh, check out this awesome," I don't want to say an artist's name, but some famous artist from the 90s, and it looks like this too. So I don't know. I could
never learn to draw comics from other comics. You learn style from other comics, but you learn to draw from actual art books, like Bridgman, Loomis, heck, even How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way is a good primer.
I look at like Frager once sent me Frank. I can't remember his name. Anyway, he was a cartoonist from back in the 40s and 50s, and he's just like this page after page after page, which is the most amazing cartooning, like shit you just don't see anymore. Like that sort of stuff has been an absolute goldmine for me.
That's an interesting point. So were you professionally trained, Mike, or did you find inspiration from comic art?
As when I was younger, I found inspiration from comic art, and then I met this guy named Neil Lamb, who was a life drawing teacher, and I was like, okay, this dude's freaking skill I super respect. So I was like, critique me, and he just ripped my stuff to shreds. like just tore me apart and showed me everything I was doing wrong.
And then after you were done having sex with him, what did he say about your art?
Wash your mouth with soap, young man.
This is a family show. Well, right.
Oh, sorry. Okay, go ahead.
No, and then so we became friends, and he gave me the George Bridgman How to Draw, the Complete Guide to Drawing from Life, and said, read this and actually study it. And so I started going through that, and then I would go back to him and like just back and forth, and just he was training me how to break away from all of these comic book handicaps that I had and learn how to draw like proper structure and form and anatomy and everything. And then when I got to the point where he's like nitpicking how I draw knuckles, I was like, okay, I think I've gotten somewhere. So it's like, you know, you just need to look. Here's the problem. I know that I'm not going to blame anybody, and I'm not pointing any fingers, but most artists, they're growing up and their parents and their friends and everybody is telling them they're the best artists ever. It's like American. You never see those people on American Idol, and they get up there and they think they're God's gift to singing, and then they start belting out the worst thing you've ever heard, and then Simon has to be the one that's like, that's the worst thing I've ever heard, right? Well, artists are like that too. So many artists are like that, and they will never listen to anyone tell them anything other than they're God's gift to art. But you're not. Nobody is. So find somebody whose art you respect, ask them for an honest critique, and then when they tear your stuff to shreds, say, thank you, sir. May I have another?
Do you think a lot of comic artists, though, are primarily inspired by how other artists draw comics?
Yep.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I think people that get into the arts is because they saw their favorite comics artists and they're like, I like that. I want to draw just like that.
Yeah, I started like that, I think, as well. I mean, I started from the Europeans, so you know, I was kind of coming at it from a different angle. But yeah, you still go through the same thing. You know, you get inspired by someone, but then if you don't really know the fundamentals of it, you're just kind of it's a facsimile. It doesn't really have the structure and the bones of what they were doing. That's why they're able to have their own style, because they learned everything. So it's still, and I consider myself, you know, almost at the beginning of that journey. It's only been like 10 years for me. I know people in this industry for 30, 40 years. So I've stopped looking to comics a while ago for like art tips, essentially.
Yeah. The Europeans, they smell. Ugh.
Hey, my wife is European.
Hey,
she smells like a beautiful flower.
We're all Europeans in one way or another.
Europeans on reparations.
That's the cradle of civilization. All right, guys. Final thoughts, I think. So, Elasmat, give me your final thoughts on everything, life.
So as both Bancroft and Miller confirmed, it is like a first act. It's an opening part of the story, and you know, if the expectation was 90s, then yeah, it definitely fulfills on that. There's enough action to keep you, you know, on your edge of your seat, and enough information to build the world. So again, if you just want action pieces and just understanding of who the characters are, then on that it succeeds, and the art is pretty good. Again, I just didn't feel emotionally connected, but I'm reading the chat and they just want to, you know, action sequences and fights. So yeah, on that aspect, it works. It succeeds. And I am not a Puerto Rican. I want that guy in the chat.
The chat is against you, Elasmat. I'd ask for your final thoughts, Mike, but I think you put some finality to the entire stream. So I'm just going to go.
I'm sorry, you invited me.
No, I'm kidding. I love you. Don't worry about it. I'm just.
I can't. Look, if somebody actually wants my advice, I'm going to give it, or my opinion, I'm going to give it to them.
Yeah.
No, I don't think Mike was any harder on Joe than the panel was on my book. So,
so I deserve all this punishment, is what everybody's basically
saying. My
saying.
final thoughts are, Even though I'm not generally a fan either of superhero, I don't know if it's a superhero, or 90s, I am a fan of Joe Sontag. I'm a fan of his enthusiasm and his passion for this book. And I did get that sense in this story. And despite the fact that all the critiques, I think, were on point tonight, I'm looking forward to seeing where he's taking the story. I'm looking forward to seeing where he's going to go with the art. And I do recommend it, especially if you are a fan of this 90s fare. Yeah, this could be exactly what you're looking for.
All right, for posterity, Mike, give us your final thoughts.
A good effort. I can see him growing into, if he takes all the critique at hand and utilizes it in the next issue, I can see the next issue being something a lot better. I don't know. That's what I say. And I can see he's got talent, he's got drive, and he just needs to build certain levels of skill set to get to just the next plateau, or not the next plateau, the next level, So I look forward to seeing what he does next.
Awesome. Thank you, Mike. Your opinions are always appreciated. I'm just joking with you. All right. Let's bring on tonight's victim. No, let's bring on the guest of honor, the man who delivered this incredible work and built this fervor, this movement, this brand, was very successful in this space, and actually generating a lot of interest and a lot of hype for this book, tapping into a core element of something that the audience was craving, and delivered in quite a big way, present company excluded, and was able to satisfy something that they've been yearning for 30 years. Let's welcome Ronin Joe.
Gentlemen, how's it going?
Hello.
Very good. We're all drinking.
Yo,
we're all,
Joe.
Loose lips.
Hey, Michael.
Yeah. We're all getting
unfortunately, I'm not drinking. It's too late, and I got to get up in the morning for work. But otherwise, I'd be joining you.
Joe, when did you first get into comics?
Oh, I don't know. Probably around 7, 8 years old, maybe something like that. I can never really remember the exact timeline. I just remember back when libraries were a thing, which I guess they still are. My mom used to take us to the libraries, and they used to have like the old beat up comics in the kids section, and I remember getting into Spider-Man at that time, and I had no idea what comics were. I didn't even know that there was an entire industry. I just knew that was at the library, and I got into it and eventually discovered more as I went. I just fell in love with the art medium of the storytelling and the fantasy worlds that were built in comics. It's pretty much been with me my entire life, even though I've dipped in and out of comics for different periods of my life for different adventures and stuff. But yeah, it's just, I don't know, there's something about it that's completely unique to me when it comes to what comic books are as far as a storytelling visual medium.
But is this your first effort in making a book, or have you been in the practice before?
No, this is my first book. I tried doing stuff earlier in my youth that never really saw the light of day. I did put out a preview book of Reaper Destroyer. This was a character I created years ago, and tried to kind of get that off the ground back in 2000. I think 2006, 2005 is when I created the character. In 2007, I put out a preview book that I took to some conventions, sold some issues, all that kind of stuff. But pretty soon after that, I got out of comics and got into music, and was in music for about a decade before getting back into comics over the last 6 years.
Well, so what motivated you, I guess, at this stage of your life to actually put out a book?
It was just always something I wanted to do. I know comic drawing has always been my first love. It's just something I really enjoy doing. But I got into music, and I was very successful as far as being an independent band. I was going out and touring the nation, and just having a hell of a fun time for 10 years. And I actually thought that was what I was going to do for the majority of the rest of my time. And the older I got, and started getting into getting married and settling down and all that kind of stuff, I was like, music is one of those things that's a lifestyle. It's not really indicative to being a parent. And I was kind of getting out of it. I was like, what am I going to do with my life? Because I'm not a kind of guy that's just like 9 to 5 satisfied, lifestyle. And I was like, I'm going to jump back into doing what I loved in the original, and that was getting into comics. So I started relearning how to draw back in 2018, because I hadn't drawn for like 10 or 12 years at that point. And I just started trying to get back into doing this stuff. I was like, you know what? I found out about crowdfunding or whatnot. I was like, I'm going to do it and put out a book. Let's go.
Yeah. And you did it successfully. So
thank you.
Yeah. You're inherently a creative, it sounds like. So you just have to fill that need for yourself.
Yeah, that's 100%. Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. From a little kid, like I've always, like that's always been my dream of just creating in general, whether it's music, whether it's art, story, whatever. It's always been something I've been into.
So I guess the question on everybody's mind is, why the 90s?
Oh, it's just where I grew up. That was the most influential time of my life, when I was peak 90s, like early 90s, image boom was right around the time I was 10 to 14 years old, in that span of time, and there was just something about that style of art or storytelling, the kind of more futuristic fantasy, anime, manga kind of feel that was in the Western styles at the time, that really just kind of brought you in. Plus, pop culture wise, it was starting to get really into the pop culture. Cartoons, you had the X-Men, Batman, Spider-Man, all these cartoons were like really going off in the 90s, and it's just something that kind of really grabbed me. And then I started to fall in love with the artists themselves, the creators, what they could do in a lifestyle of just on their own, especially with Image was a big thing with me because of what it stood for with the independent stuff, and just creating what you wanted to create without having the comics code or anything of that over your head, and just basically throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks. It was like, to me, it was a very creative time. A lot of stuff fell flat. I agree with that. The storytelling wasn't amazing in everything, but in general, I think it was just a fun time in comics. And me, I'm a very simple man when it comes to what entertains me. Personally, like I just entertain me, give me something to take my mind off of the real world for a while and let me get lost into the fantasy, and that was something that comics was really big with in the 90s. And the art was great. I thought the colors were great, like the revolution of the computer coloring, it started, and where that went. It's just visually, I'm a very visually pleased person, if that makes sense. Like I take a lot of pleasure through things I see with my eyes, and comics was one of the biggest things for that.
Actually, may I ask a question?
Oh yeah. Please jump in.
In the chat, Wyatt said we barely heard much about the story. We were talking about the 90s and everything. I have a question for Joe, because it was brought up throughout the discussion here.
Yeah.
Matt, the main character.
Mm-hmm.
At least in the main book. So I haven't read the supplemental. That's my fault. Just going off the main book. We don't really get to know much about him because he doesn't know anything about him in that book. And he's got amnesia or something. What can you tell us in your words, about Matt a little bit, and also why you think Mike is wrong and we should care about him?
Right.
So Matt is designed to be a mystery. That's Matt is supposed to be a representative of the reader itself. Like, I'm throwing you into a mystery of a time of something that's going on. It's meant to be jarring. You're supposed to be wondering what the hell is going on as things are developing. So as the story develops, as Matt figures stuff out that's going on, so will the reader itself. So it's told through the eyes of Matt as a character of this person that doesn't have his memory and what he's experienced. And, like, the idea is, like, how would you feel for being just thrust into, this crazy world that's got demons and angels, monsters, and all this kind of stuff? You're a big part of it. You don't know why. The only person that's really has any kind of information is a demon that's attached to you that takes pleasure in kind of torturing and misleading you. And it's just, it's fun for that person, So all you know for the time that he's been conscious, I guess you could say, in the book, it's 9 months, is this confusion, pain, torment and you're constantly being attacked, so the whole story is told through his eyes. And when he discovers stuff, when he discovers what his purpose is, why he is where he's at, what he's being used for, all that kind of stuff, the story will start to unravel more and more and be shown as a clearer picture as we go through his eyes.
I likened him a little bit to Al Simmons. Is that apt? Is there inspiration there, or are you going in a different direction? In that, when we first meet him, he's just like a face. We kind of know he doesn't know himself either.
Yeah, it's funny because with as much visual kind of look that he might get from Spawn or whatever, I really wanted to stray away from Spawn as much as I could. The one thing that is very similar is the kind of amnesia stuff at the beginning, but that was actually influenced more by the Bourne Identity than it was by Spawn. Because I'll be completely honest with you, I'm not a big reader of a lot of comics. Like a lot of my storytelling comes from movie storytelling than it does from comic book storytelling. So there was a lot of period of time where I didn't really read Spawn and know the actual origin when I was younger. So the inspiration of the amnesia and someone waking up and having all these abilities and being tracked down by a government agency in Bourne Identity, that's obviously different in this book, was from that kind of concept in that movie. And I wanted to have that kind of confused character right from the get-go with all these questions that we could dive in and answer. Because one of the things I hate origin stories, because as a reader, they bore the hell out of me to sit through a book and try to figure out what the origin of this character is. I'd rather get going into the story and have the origin revealed through whether flashbacks or whatever you can as the story goes. And that was kind of the concept with this.
You actually you tapped into an interesting point earlier that I'd like to revisit. When you're talking about the 90s, you mentioned, the aesthetics of the books and the characters and the art style that was coming out at the time. But you mentioned that the creators at the time were rock stars. And you found this, like the crowdfunding space. You built a lot of buzz, and you were able to garner an audience, mainly tapping into that 90s fervor. And I'm wondering if were you tuned into the fact that this crowdfunding space does embody a lot of that attribute of like pseudo celebrity and comic books, where the two are intermingled and rock stars are putting out comics, and that's the sell essentially. And is that the approach that you took when you decided to enter into the space?
Good question. No, actually not at all. Cause I had no idea what crowdfunding was when I started retooling this book. Originally I started working on this book before I knew what crowdfunding was. And it was just, like, let's make a book. Let's try to get so many issues done. Let's try to pitch it and get it picked up. That was the whole idea. So I had none of that in mind when I first started doing the book. When I first got into crowdfunding, I guess it was something that kind of developed as far as knowing personalities and stuff as I started to understand what crowdfunding is, what at the time, what CG was, like all this kind of stuff. So that kind of came later. But it was kind of reminiscent now. I guess I haven't really thought about it till you bring that up, but that's kind of a good point, that there is kind of that big personality aspect to what we do, I guess, in crowdfunding here. So, but no, it wasn't an attraction to me.
Some YouTuber just apparently made a manga and sold 200,000 copies in the first day. That just happened. I didn't even know about it. He's got like 20 million subs or something.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and people don't know anything about the book. Like, I would argue that.
Who was that?
I couldn't tell you. I never seen him before. I just saw Donald, I think, retweeted it. Maybe Donald. I don't know. I just saw it like literally before we started streaming. I was like, oh damn, 200,000 copies. That's
crazy. Congratulations to him. That's awesome.
Yeah, if anybody knows in the chat, drop the name. Yeah, I'd almost argue that like people cared more about the creators back then than they did about the books. And
yeah, let me jump in. It's Mangas We Make, and the YouTuber was Dexerto.
Okay, haven't heard of it.
It's crazy. People can have 20 million subs.
My son actually bought that book, and I was like, "Wait a minute, why does that sound familiar?" And I was like, "Oh wait, I bought that for my son. It was a pre-order, so I had no clue I was buying a book from a YouTuber." So,
Weird. I'm going to try to bring them up. But yeah, I would argue that in the 90s, people cared more about the creators than they did about the books. And isn't that like our situation here in the crowdfunding space?
That could be. I know that definitely in the 90s, that was definitely a thing. Definitely following the creators as far as the artist goes was definitely something I was more into than the characters. Basically, I followed artists around, right? So if somebody was on a book and they left, I usually followed that artist to the next book. Unless the artist that came behind them was around that caliber, I usually didn't stick around. Character to me was never really a huge thing when it comes to comics. I like the art specifically, and I'm talking about like as a reader, or from my point of view, what I like in comics. Not necessarily what I try to do when it comes to storytelling, but that was primarily my big thing, was the art, because it was just something beautiful to look at. You know, like the story was secondary to me. There's a lot of comics I never even read. A lot of comics today that I don't read. A lot of stuff that I backed that I don't actually really read because I enjoy the art. Today, yeah, you know, it's, I guess, probably similar. I guess depending on where you're coming from and what you like.
Yeah,
comics,
it's similar, but different. Back in the day, you had Wizard, and they were more like rock stars, but there was no parasocial connection there. Whereas now there is that parasocial relationship, because you can actually just we didn't used to be able to DM Jim Lee.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point.
Oh, all right, Mike.
Well, one of us could. There you go.
Some of us could. Some of us knew Jim, but not us. But yeah, it's interesting. I was the opposite. I dipped out of books because I didn't like where the story was headed, and but if I liked the story, I would put up with the art. So we have a kind of different pedigree.
Yeah, I'm in the minority with a lot of that stuff. I mean, most people are in for the story. Me, like I said, I primarily like stuff as a fan for the art.
200,000 copies.
Yeah, but he's got 20 million subs.
Oh shit! Well, I guess that will help.
Million. Yeah. So
I guess that's who Ethan will be targeting next.
Well, so what is the percentage of backers that will actually read this book, do you think? This is
unknowable.
Who knows?
People like manga, I guess.
Isn't this
that's the thing? Like, if he made a manga, probably more, because that's like the hot ticket thing at the moment.
Well, why even focus on the story then, right? Like, that was the thing in the 90s. If your name is the brand as a creator, you don't really have to do a whole lot with the story. You just need to provide some kind of aesthetic or a visceral experience, something that is representative of who you are, which I think is better expressed through the art than the story. So maybe that is.
But I don't know. I have a story to tell, and I'm not famous. So where does that leave me? So it's like, what option do you have? And why is Mark Miller famous? Because he wrote good stories.
Yeah.
And like, it's not like. Everyone will always want.
When you think of like all of the great artists that almost none of them got famous just because of their art. They were on books that had good stories.
But we're talking about crowdfunding here, and this is the space that we want to, sell books in.
Comic books, forgive me.
It's its own beast, right? Like, it's an evolution of that marketplace.
I also think it's very subjective, or is that the right word? I don't know, but it comes down to personal taste of what people like. There are times, it's kind of weird because there are times where I'll read something and I think it's great, and somebody else will read it and be like, "No, this is trash." And I'll read something I think is trash, and somebody else will read it and be like, "No, this was great." So I guess individually, it's like, what do those people want? And it's kind of hard to argue back and forth. Now there are, yes, everything we can agree on when it comes to actual like storytelling and stuff like that, and then it comes down to the actual reader after that, and that's I guess the true test of any book, any story, anything, is what do the people that like that. I'm sure we can think of some truly bad books that are out there right now that people really, really like and do very well. So is that a success, or is that not? And is that being something satisfying that crowd? Then that's all good.
Well, it's like this. Do you want to make what's that? Who made Fargo? The writers?
I'm not sure.
Coen brothers.
Coen brothers.
Yeah. Do you want to be the Coen brothers or do you want to be Michael Bay?
Well, I never watched Fargo, so
well, it's not just Fargo, but they write just really fantastic stories, and then Michael Bay just makes everything explode.
I guess it depends on what you want.
Yeah, but
right?
yeah, I don't know if
That's what I'm saying. There's
yeah.
different audiences. Michael Bay films do way better.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah,
yes,
right. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. That's absolutely my point. Yeah. So yeah, when it comes down like to me as a reader, I'm very satisfied with certain things, and other things don't really bother me as much as other people. So I'm a very easily entertained person, especially when it comes to movies. So I fall in that category as a more just give me something fun and cool to, occupy my time, and I'm good.
To speak to Well-Read's question though, it is its own beast, crowdfunding, and it is primarily about how many eyeballs you can get on your project, and also how many you can convince to be, inspired enough to back. It's like that's the formula. And for a while now, a lot of us have sort of looked at crowdfunding as the be all and end all, but it really probably should be just one part of your long-term plan of getting your story out there. That's why the story and the contents of the book does matter in every other field. Whereas the sort of buying sight unseen aspect of crowdfunding, you're backing up when it isn't even made yet. That's a gamble that the backer takes. Whereas if you're getting into stores or you're going to publishers, the things like word of mouth and actual content and how fast you can get it out, that stuff matters a lot more. So yeah, it's a lot of people will complain about the situation of crowdfunding, but it is what it is, and that's all you can really do is keep moving forward and keep trying to make the best thing you can do and keep building your crowd, and there's nothing else to really do about it.
Yeah, it's good. I 100% agree on that. Yep.
Just keep swimming.
Yeah, I think that's actually interesting. Like, nobody cares if you're the Coen brothers in crowdfunding. They just want to know how many.
Some people do. Like, take Narwhal for example. Per Berg, who just is now published with Mark Miller and Dark Horse. A lot of people saw in Per what that there's something special there, and Mark Miller saw the same thing. So it does matter. It may not matter right now, today, on whatever book is being the hot book of the day, but I think eventually it ends up mattering. And as well, you'll get books that have all the promotion in the world, but then they're not as good when you get them in hand and when you read them, and then you can see like, the following book didn't do as well.
Sorry. That actually makes my point, is that if your goal is to just crowdfund, nobody cares if you're the Coen brothers. But if you want to eventually expand into a larger audience beyond this one of like rock star celebrity, beyond the image formula, the early image formula, being the Coen brothers helps, because that talent that Narwhal has, I'd say in a lot of ways was underappreciated in this space, quite frankly, mainly because he just wasn't. He's a personality. He's a known, figure. He's a character, but he wasn't larger than life, and he definitely wasn't meeting, the staggering numbers that he probably could have had his talent been at the forefront as it is right now with Vatican City. So it's kind of a conundrum, right? Like, where's your long-term plans? Is it YouTube, or is it eventually other mediums and a larger audience?
Well, it's as long as he's producing, I think that's the end goal. Or that's the good thing. As long as people are able to make their books however they make them, good. That's what we want. Whether or not you're going to be making 5,000 or 100,000 right now is, one thing or another. That really does come down to how charismatic you are and how connected you are, and all a lot of different factors.
Well, Allred brings up something that, like, the other media, right? And this speaks to the the quality of all those image books. How many of those original image books made it successfully into long-term other media? I know they had the Spawn movie, but that was just a blip and out. The cartoon was better, but all the stuff we've seen come out for the last 20 years, I mean, okay, you got 300, that came out in the 90s, but that was like Frank Miller. Everything else is like Marvel, DC. You've got a few other things, but the stuff that gets translated into the better or the broader media isn't stuff that relied on art. It was the stuff that relied on story.
The best example of that is Ninja Turtles. Ninja Turtles didn't rely so much on the art as it did the story, and look where it's at now. It's $1 billion franchise. Mm-hmm. And yeah, like it really is. Do you want the quick monetary gain, or do you want that long-term legacy that I always talk about? And again, we bring up Narwhal. He was committed to his craft. He was committed to what he was doing. He believed in what he was doing, and look where he's at now. It was a long-term build, and I always stress legacy. If you want success long-term, you got to think to yourself legacy. Going back to the whole argument about the 90s, like how many image stories from the 90s do you remember on par with, say, Crisis on Infinite Earths or George Perez's Wonder Woman, for example?
Depends on how old you are.
I'm near 50, so we can throw down. I'm just joking.
Well, that's
no, like it depends on, with that specifically, it depends on how old you are, what area you grew up in, like how much did you actually go back to, decades before you to actually read these stories or get it into them, if it's not specifically the storytelling that you like. It's very much a generational thing when it comes, not everything. I mean, there's some people that just like it all as far as the good story versus bad story, but there are a lot of people that are, it depends on, the same thing with music, right? You grow up in a certain era, maybe you have an appreciation for your dad's style of music or whatever, but you have the love for your stuff, and it is what speaks to you specifically in that realm. So somebody could be like, oh, I love, whatever story in the 90s you could pick out better than this back then for whatever reason. And somebody else is going to be like, nah, that was trash. What are you talking about? Like, that was actually writing back then. This is just like, glorified, tit showing or something. Like, so it boils down to me. It always boils down to taste when it comes to stuff like that.
Well, I mean, yeah, there's definitely, whatever impression you had when you were younger of what's good and what isn't. And that's going to be generational, definitely. I mean, this generation, a lot of what speaks to them are these very immediate storytelling approaches where, they're all ADHD and TikTok driven, and they just want to scroll through, get to the point. I mean, is there just going to be a continual degradation?
Probably. Yeah. I mean, I think, isn't everything eroding from the beginning? When you have like a golden age, it doesn't go past golden, right? You go to silver, bronze, on down. In my opinion, because it's the storytelling is going to change. The hot thing comes around, and that becomes popular, and then that gets copied, right? And then you get a copy of that, and a copy of that, and a copy of that, and eventually you lose whatever was the true element of the storytelling or what made that thing great. And then all the debates happen, which is better, what this or that, generation, blah, blah, blah. And it's just kind of a conversation that goes around in a circle until everyone gets tired of talking about it. And whoever's right is right in their own mind. It's never really going to change. To me, I think it's, you as a reader, are you enjoying what you're getting? Are you spending the money on that stuff? And if that's the case, cool.
Well, counterpoint, and I haven't read any, so I can't really speak to individual issues, but things like One Piece are in their 1000th, issue or whatever they're in. So, I mean, clearly there are people who are reading long form stories. Absolutely. I don't know the solution, because if I did, I probably wouldn't be sitting on a well-read stream. I'd be sitting on a yacht sipping Mai Tais, because I'd be a billionaire.
Hey,
you know.
Isn't the thing with manga though? Isn't the thing with manga though that it generally manga generally has a creator on a long run under like one specific creator, or maybe just a handful of creators,
creator owned,
right? And where modern Western comics are you change over time. Many writers come in over periods of time, change characters, all that kind of stuff. Whereas One Piece can be that long form storytelling because it's that one creator telling a long form story that you can kind of always have that consistency, right? Whereas our comics, the Western comics, will change from decade to decade depending on the writers that come in. What are they trying to establish with the characters? What are you actually trying to tell? You know, back in the day, you're telling really fun stories that were kind of more made for kids, and it started to mature. And you get into more of the modern day age where it's more political, ideological driven stuff, you know. So there's waves. It's a roller coaster of stuff for that stuff. But the manga, which I don't really read, but from what I've been told, is more of just that really solid character driven. You could go back how many ever issues and really kind of feel how that character is developed over time, and you have that luxury of time.
Yeah, they want to see that progression and development in how the character evolves and grows.
Yeah, and that's, you know, that's what I want to do with my character. You know, it's designed to have a story arc, an arc of development where you start at one spot, a lump of clay, and you're molding this character as they go through their experiences to get to the point where you want them to be, you know, eventually. So that is the whole idea of the long form. And this is what Reaper Destroyer is. It's an ongoing story. I never liked the whole crowdfunding thing, which again, like, I'm not doing another 40 some odd page book. I think it's fucking ridiculous. I'm going to go back to doing what I originally wanted to do, which was like 20-page book to actually tell a ongoing serialized story where I can actually develop characters through scenes instead of trying to cram so much into a big book and get it out once a year, once every other year, or whatever, and tell a one and done story. That's just not what I want to do with the character or the story.
It's an interesting thing, because if you ask readers what they want, like people who back crowdfunds, and you say, do you want an ongoing series, or do you want some more episodic beginning, middle, end stories? Almost always the majority will say they want beginning, middle, end in the one book story.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But when I look at the numbers, the crowdfunds that do the best are always part of an ongoing series. In terms of, like, they're the ones that keep growing and
right, because you could build your audience.
Yeah. So it's an interesting conundrum.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of like the one and done stuff, because that's just never been my taste. And I like the ongoing, continuing stories that I grew up with, you know, like characters that develop over 10, 15, 20, 30 years. And I think that's what I'm working for with this book. Like, the whole concept is a giant story that's told in arcs, but it's going to be continuing as we go. I want to bring it back to a shorter format in comics instead of this big format. And that was actually one thing I had to learn about crowdfunding, because I was actually surprised, you know, not knowing anything about crowdfunding and learning as you go. Like, I came into this, Reaper Destroyer was originally a 22-page concept for issue 1. And I got into crowdfunding and I'm like, all right, well, I got to bump it up because of the whole rules of crowdfunding. So I bumped it up to 32 pages, and then people still bitched about certain things. I'm like, okay, I'm going to bump it up even more. And then when I did that, I found myself, it was hard to do what I was trying to do with the book at such a large format, which is, you know, Bancroft and I have talked about this before.
Yeah.
Which is why I was like, I'm done with this, you know, bigger books. That's not what I want to do. I want to go back to the shorter books so I can have chapters, I guess you could say, in a larger story.
Yeah, literally,
less, you know, and get books out faster.
Yeah. Literally the day before I read Reaper Destroyer originally, Joe was on a stream talking about how he wants to just go back to doing 22 pages more regularly. And then I read Reaper Destroyer and I was like, oh yeah, this would work so much better as shorter issues out quicker. Just like the way it was paced and written and everything. So I was like, yeah, you should absolutely do that. And it's funny, the whole kind of rules of crowdfunding thing. I mean, they really, beyond the rule of, you know, get your book out, I mean, there really shouldn't be any rules out there. You know, people will buy whatever they think it's worth, and if you can get away with it, charge more. If you can get away with it, charge less. Whatever you want to do. So
like that's really what I want to do in the future, and I want to make it cheaper for people, because I know crowdfunding, it can get expensive, especially with all the competition out there. So I want to try to make it cheaper for the backer. Is getting money is nice, don't get me wrong. This campaign did really well. That was fun. But I want to increase the readers, not necessarily the price tag that I get out of the campaign. So I do a next campaign, maybe it does third of what I did in this one, but maybe the solid diehard people are coming back to actually enjoy the story and allowing me to actually write it and produce it going forward. That's what I want, because I got a story to tell here. I've got a really big world full of mythology and things I need to get into that's going to take a long time to piece together and to tell the audience that is just scratching the surface with this one issue. So regardless, I'm going to do this, whether it makes a shit ton of money or not. It's something I'm going to do until I can't afford to do it. If I have to come out of pocket, I came out of pocket quite a bit for this book before I even launched it, with some of the people I hired to be on the book. So, that's just my mentality. Crowdfunding was nice to get the ball rolling, so to speak, but this is, to me, way larger than just like, let me put out a book and try to make as much money as I can and then do it again, so.
And then do you think you can release on a regular schedule? Because that's another challenge with crowdfunding, is that, you have to stream and, maintain that parasocial relationship, maintain the rock star status, but then also produce your book. So
yeah, it's hard. I guess I'm not really, I could care less about or let me say that right. I couldn't care less about the rock star status, personality aspect of YouTubing. I stream because I like to stream, mostly because I like to talk about comics and comic book art. If people follow that and are entertained by it, cool. But my main thing is making comics. So the biggest thing I realized that doing this issue was it took so damn long to do 40 some odd pages. And I don't want to do that, so that was the main thing, is I can draw a 20-page book a lot faster than a 40 some page book, and get it out quicker. So my whole idea is to get it out quicker. I would love to get multiple books out a year. Who knows if that will ever be possible, but that's the goal that I'm working to. I also want to expand titles and different characters, hire different writers, different artists to put more out through the company, so that people that back my books are getting multiple books a year, even if it's not multiple Reaper Destroyer books a year, and just kind of expand what I'm doing. The way I look at it, I'm 43 years old. Some might say that's young, which it is, but you only have so much time left in life. I could be taking it tomorrow, which hopefully that's not the case, but I only have so much time in life to do what I want to do. And I spent a lot of time doing music, which was great, but now I have a lot of characters. I have a lot of stories I want to tell, and I want to get better at what I do. And I want to keep on learning as I go. So I'm trying not to mess around and trying not to have a lot of time wasted by doing things that aren't focused on creating and developing characters and stories going forward, and getting better as I go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's tough to juggle because you've got like a job and
yeah,
family and all those things that come with the 40s. So
true, absolutely. It's a lot of time you have to delegate to different places, but I've always been a pretty driven person with everything I've done in life, and have managed to do things. So I'm doing what I love, which is drawing. I love telling stories, and at the same time handling what I have to handle when it comes to paying the bills, and then having a family as well. So it's a challenge. It's a fun challenge. I enjoy doing it.
The job obviously makes it very challenging if you're the artist, and Joe and I are in the same boat on this one. But at the same time, it's also freeing. We can, when other people are sort of beholden to, spending crazy amounts of time on live streams and stuff like that, we can say, well, look, I make my living elsewhere, and I would rather invest that time into my own creative things. So we have that privilege because we do have our own income, and that's a benefit. So it's not like it, it's this and that, it's up and down or whatever it is. But I feel like it also, I'm doing exactly what I want to do.
Yeah.
And that, I think that's a good place to be in when you're, have precious little time to invest in, your creativity and everything like that.
I think it's a good way of putting it. You know, like I have a really good job. I worked hard to get this job. If I could ever do what I'm doing now, as far as comics go, full time, that'd be awesome. You know, but the reality is that that's probably never going to happen. So I have a financial income, which is fine. That's not going anywhere. Life is stable, so I can focus on this and try to develop this as best I can. I also don't have a worry of really caring what anybody thinks. Now that sounds cocky, but in a way that I'm not trying to get into certain circles or break into the industry or whatever. I'm just doing something I love. If anybody else loves it and wants to go along for the ride, then great. I'm gonna continue to try to get better at my craft and learn as I go. But I don't go into things thinking like, oh, what is this person going to think? Or what is this industry person going to think? Because I could really give a fuck about it. If the people that buy the book like it, then I'm happy about it, you know, and I get critiques. You know, Bancroft gave me a really great critique, and I love that. You know, I take that to heart, and I try to take other critiques. I've had other people talk about certain things like, hey, do this better or work on this. And I'm like, great, you know, I'm going to try to do that going forward. And that's what I'm going to try to do to create a good story. And hopefully the people that like the story are going to keep coming back. But I'm not worried about trying to get into the industry or trying to get into a big crowdfunding circle or something like that because of whatever. You know, it's just I'm writing the thing I love. I'm going to try to get better at it. And hopefully the people that like it will like it and come back.
Of course, a crowdfunding circle jerk.
Yeah.
Yeah. Kirby says, well, you should care what the readers think too, right? So you'd be also catering to their tastes, I guess, as you go along.
Well, yeah. If anyone was paying attention to what I was saying, yeah, I care about what the readers see. That's the point. Like I care about what the readers think. And that's
your first mistake was thinking while Red was paying attention to what you were saying.
I'm on my third glass of wine.
Stop drinking. You know,
I can't.
What the readers think is the only thing I really care about. Is my point. You know, and getting better, and the people that want to insist in getting better and giving me tips, I'm all about it as well. Like I'm very open to. Like I was listening to the panel, I was listening to everything that Mike said and everything else everybody had to say about the story, about the art. And, you know, and trust me, like it's not the first time that I've heard anything like that. And like it's stuff that I haven't noticed myself that anybody else is saying. You know, like I try to be a very critical eye of what I do, go back and look at things. And there's tons of stuff in this book I wish I had done different at the time or written different or drawn different. But instead of worrying about what that was, it's getting better in the next book, trying to be better at, you know, faces or better at hands, better at this, you know, or, you know, write this a little bit better, tell this a little bit more clearly, all that kind of stuff. And it's based on things of like what people tell me, like Bancroft again gave me a really great critique. I respect the hell out of Bancroft. So it was nice to be able to sit down and get those kind of things and then take that going forward. And a lot of other people have done that as well. So
nice. That's the right attitude.
So what's your grand vision for Reaper Destroyer? Where are you hoping to take this this universe and this character?
I mean, my grand vision for the story is just to continue telling the story as much as I can. I would love to take the character from what it is into different mediums. I mean, that's not my ultimate goal to get into, you know, games or movies or something like that. But I want to create a good IP that people can love. I want to create a story or a universe that people can really dive into that's got characters that they can relate to and want to know more about. I'm really big into world building. Now I'm trying my best to do that as a first-time writer, first-time creator. And so I'm starting at a certain point and I'm going to try to get better as I go. But I'm very inspired by like Tolkien and C.S. Lewis and guys like that create a mythology. And the whole concept of Reaper Destroyer is having an actual world of a mythology that's my own kind of created mythology based on certain, you know, real life things, but mixing in a shit ton of stuff when it comes to conspiracies, religious tones, all this kind of stuff, and tell a giant story. The point about Reaper Destroyer is you're kind of stuck in one moment in time in this grander story of these characters, which is why I like to deal with immortal characters, because it allows you to kind of tell a story. If you want to tell a story in the past or the future, you can do that with some of these characters. They all have a rich history. Even Matt has a very rich history. We just don't know about it yet. So diving into that is going to be fun. And I hope that the reader can come along and be excited about the things we do with his character as he grows and matures in the book and in the story of who he's going to be at some point in time.
Is it going to be like kind of just a single series, kind of like Spawn or Cerebrus or Cerebus? I always say that wrong. Or are you thinking of like branching out into other titles that also build the world?
Oh, yeah. So my point is to stick on Reaper Destroyer personally, to write that book and to draw that book. But Like Kayla in the chat, I've got her writing a story of another character of mine. I've got another writer that I'm talking to about writing another character that expands the entire universe. Because, like I said, Reaper Destroyer is one character in this massive universe that I have in my head. Obviously, I can see it; you guys can't. But my goal is to develop that so that everybody else can see it through the different characters that I do. I mean, ultimately, again, I came from the grand, the 90s events, right? Like, I would love to put titles out there at some point. I'd love to have an event that brings all those titles together for one big storytelling aspect of it. Yeah, Kayla's in the chat. Like, I honestly have ideas for this book to go to 100 issues loosely, right? I know where I want to go from A to B when it comes to that, but it's getting there. I don't have time to do 100 issues. Like, that's the sucky part, especially in this format of crowdfunding. But no, there's my goal is to have many different books by other writers and other artists to put out there to expand this universe.
Yeah, and it sounds like you're drawing multiple inspirations. Like we talked a lot about the 90s, and I think you put that to the forefront, but you're also mentioning how manga and Tolkien is inspiring a lot of what the work that you're doing. So are there other areas that you also draw inspiration from when you're crafting this world?
I took a lot from religion for, like, I'm a Christian, so there's interesting Christian conspiracy theories, I guess you could say, that I always thought were interesting. I wanted to craft into the story that I thought would make good story content, especially when you get into quote unquote mythology or whatever. What is it that inspired those mythologies? Like, a lot of the characters I have with the elder sons or whatever, they are, I can't go into spoilers. Kayla will yell at me, but there are things that are going to pan out where the things that we know of in real life were inspired by something. And I'm going to tell you what those things were that inspired it. And I'm going to tell that over a period of time in this massive world that I have planned. My world, my story starts from the beginning of time to the end of time. And right now we are focused in this point in time right now with Reaper Destroyer. But there's going to be a lot of stuff that I want to get into if I'm ever blessed to do it, that are going to really expand this greater world that I've concocted in my head. You should see inside my head sometime. It's really crazy, but I'm telling you, it's there. It's a really awesome concept. I can't wait to get out to everybody.
Yeah.
Have you told Kayla everything you're planning?
She knows the majority of it. Yeah, she knows the majority of it.
Yeah, I remember I told Joe, my editor, everything about the Lucent that I knew of at the time. It was a very fun experience, draining but fun. It was interesting, and as well in doing that, articulating it, we actually able to find some plot holes and fix them up.
Yeah, and that's been fun. Like, so focusing on where I'm focusing is nice because I can keep that there as far as the storytelling goes, even though in my mind I'm just like, in this year this happened, and this, before time is time, this happened, and like all the stuff that I have brewing in my head. Like I said, really take a lot of inspiration from Lord of the Rings and things of that nature. Like, I love the whole ages of the earth when it came to Lord of the Rings, and that's a big concept in Reaper Destroyer. We just haven't touched on it, obviously, because it's the first issue, but there's a lot of that is going to be poured into it. It's really much more of a fantasy than it is anything else. It's just a fantasy wrapped in kind of like a sci-fi horror feel, but there's a lot more fantasy elements in the storytelling to come, I guess you could say. And issue 2 is going to go in a completely different direction than I think people are thinking that I'm taking this book, because again, I want to get as far away from Spawn, as far away from the darkness, anything like that people can see visually or whatever that this is inspired by. I don't want to have anything to do really with those elements if I can help it. I want to draw out something that's a lot more unique when it's based on all the subject matter. And there's a lot of religious tones in this book, not so much like Spawn goes, but there's elements that I think are going to be really unique to the way I'm going to tell it.
Yeah, well, it sounds like then you're taking it in a different direction than the issue that came out. So you're going to like craft kind of a more structured narrative and maybe, set up something that's going to be paid off over multiple issues. And is that kind of the plan going forward?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. First issues are first issues, and being my first time out, under the advice of a lot of people and trying to structure the best I can to get information out, characters, all that kind of stuff. And again, not the format I really wanted to do. So there was a lot of information dump in some ways, I guess, into this book. and I really want to slow down that pace going forward. Like, you know, the next book, the next few books are really going to be developing the relationship between Matt and Apophis, you know, and there's going to be a lot more development of Matt, because Matt is underdeveloped right now for a reason, you know, like there's a purpose why he is just raw emotion right now. Then that's something he's got to grow out of as he knows his purpose, and he knows more about who he is going forward is going to be something that he needs to develop. And the same thing with Apophis. You know, Apophis has a reason why he's here. It's kind of a mystery. Touched on it a little bit with a supplemental book, but there's a lot going on with Apophis as well. And how do everybody work in this world? What does Victor have to do with the main story? I touch on that a little bit. What is the whole threat with Vanessa? You know, there's a lot of things that need to be pulled together. And the whole idea is to show you how it's going to be pulled together to work as one continuing story, or at least, you know, put a cap on this story arc. I think this story arc is going to be about 6 issues, I believe, this first story arc.
Okay. Yeah, and I think Apophis was the panel's favorite character, actually. they mentioned him a lot. There was a lot of interest there. And
we don't care yet that he's been torturing Matt. It's like we don't have that care yet. I mean, it'll be good. It'll develop over time, but at the moment, it's like, yeah, he's got a 6 scythe, and he's
right now we want to torture Matt.
People out,
yeah, yeah. Apophis is one of my favorite characters. My 2 favorite characters in the book, oddly enough, is Victor and Apophis. Because there's so little I'm doing with Matt right now because of the whole mystery aspect of how I'm dealing with his character. So I jumped into other characters to have them developed more. There wasn't even really supposed to be a supplemental book. It was actually something I ended up doing just because the campaign did so well, and I wanted to give something back to people for back in the book. I was like, let me put out a supplemental. What the hell am I going to do with a supplemental? I'll just tell a backstory real quick. So I pulled that out and was like, let's tell a backstory about Apophis. Let's tell a backstory about Vanessa, and just give a little bit extra information. So they got fleshed out a little bit more than they were originally supposed to. And that could have been a mistake. And that could have been just me being wide-eyed when it came to the campaign and stuff that I've learned, stuff I'm not going to do in the future with a lot of things. Is jumping so hard at certain stuff because I think that it's like, you know, something I should do. So storytelling wise, that might have hurt a little bit, putting those backup stories. Yeah, exactly. There's some stuff that I probably should have saved to reveal in the book. And, you know, now it is what it is. There's nothing I can do to kind of take that back, but it's just now going forward, telling the story of how these 2 characters, and there's a lot of mystery with Apophis. I mean, the stuff that I put in the supplemental book was just scratching the surface of his backstory. There's a shit ton of stuff there that needs to be fleshed out and a greater purpose. Same thing with Vanessa, same thing with Matt, same thing with Victor. A lot of these characters I set up to have a lot of mystery that we can develop as this slow burn story goes. I didn't want to just put everything out here and be like, hey, this person is this, they did this, they're here for this, let's go. Because to me, it's boring as a story writer or a storyteller. Like, there's no mystery in it. I like giving a little bit of mystery, making you wonder what's going on and wanting to know more. Maybe that lands with some people, maybe it doesn't, you know, and that's just something I'll learn from as I'm going forward as a writer.
Yeah. A lot of people put some of the meat of the story into these supplementals. And I guess you're not a fan of that going forward. Probably won't do any more supplementals. No,
there's going to be no more supplementals. That was just kind of, like I said, learning crowdfunding, right? You see what other creators do, and you kind of think of that is quote unquote not the rules, right? But just as a blueprint. And you're like, oh, these people are doing this, that's good, people like it, maybe that's something I should do, you know. And then you fall into that trap of doing that thing. Now, having a grander idea of what I want to do going forward, I want to tell backup stories or tell stories about characters in their own titles, you know. So there's characters I've earmarked to have their own titles to expand the universe. Some that might be in this book that eventually will spawn off and get their own title, and some that are just brand new to the universe themselves. But yeah, the whole supplemental backup stories, I'm not going to do that going forward.
Yeah. And it's actually interesting that you have to keep an eye on other creators. Like, there's this whole culture of crowdfunding that you're trying to, like, the zeitgeist of it, that you got to keep up with the Joneses.
Yeah.
And in some way, like, you want to stay divorced from it too, because you want to stay like your own commodity. You don't really want to just be attached to everybody else's, direction. So
that's kind of what I learned. And that's kind of what I'm doing now going forward. You know, like again, you come into the space for the first time, you see who's successful, you see what they did that's successful, you're trying to kind of emulate that and create your own success. But you realize that sometimes that stuff doesn't work for you individually as a creator. And I got a better sense, a more narrowed sense of what I want to do, how I want to do things going forward that works better for me, for what I want to do as a storyteller than what somebody else is doing. And again, a lot of these books come out, right? They're graphic novels. They're kind of designed to be that way. A to B stories. You get in there, you get out, beginning, middle, end, and then you move on to another story that comes out beginning, middle, end. And that's not what I wanted to do. You know, I kind of got trapped into that whole page count thing that kind of made it was hard for me. Like, that's not what I wanted to do with this book from the get-go. And it just became what it was. And now I'm just like, I'm going back to what I want to do. It's just shorter books where I can actually tell a story and I can get into a scene and I can develop that scene. I can develop a character instead of trying to take 3 different storylines and cram it into a 40, 60 page book and do a beginning to end story, which I personally don't like as a reader. I definitely don't like that as a writer.
Yeah, I could understand. Cool. It sounds like there's a lot more to look forward to from you, Joe. I'd probably get into the whole thing of like avoiding pitfalls in crowdfunding too, but we'd run out of time and talk for another hour, I think, about that. But,
yeah.
All right. So what do we have to look forward to? Are you going to be crowdfunding issue 2 anytime soon?
Yeah, I got issue 2 tentatively set up for July to do the next crowdfund. I'm trying to give myself a little bit of time. I've already started working on it art-wise. I'm trying to knock out more pages than I had done the first time around, so that hopefully with the shorter format of pages, it won't be that long of a wait. I also got a more consistent team for this time when it comes to like the inking and stuff, which I didn't have. You know, it was a learning experience when it came to that. I want to do a Kickstarter at some point just to see what's going on over there, to see if I can get any kind of stragglers to come over and check out the story. Because to me, one extra buyer that might like the story is good for me. It's the same mentality I had when I was in a band. Go play a small town somewhere in the middle of nowhere in a bar, and there's only 2 people in there. But you know what? Those 2 people really dug it. They bought your stuff. They came back the next time with 3 friends to see you the next time you played. You know, so it's just wherever I can put the book. You know, Kickstarter, Indiegogo. I would love to do my own site sometime if I ever have the chance, you know, and just put it out there. And then eventually, you know, I want to get the books out to stores and to in the hands of anybody that can be a reader. That's my ultimate goal, because I want people to read the story. I don't want to just stay in a small space and become a rock star in that space or generate, you know, a ton of money. It goes back to the music thing. You know, I said this all the time to anybody that watches the channel. When I was coming up in the music scene in the early 2000s, there was a ton of bands that were really good in a local scene. They could draw a crowd in that town. They would play a show. There would always be, you know, 50 to 100 people there. They were rock star status in that small area. I didn't want that. I wanted to expand as far as I could expand. You know, we were going out and touring other states. We wanted to get into other countries, and it didn't matter to me if we went out to Iowa and played a show in front of nobody or 5 people, because we were expanding what we were doing, and we were slowly getting a following across our touring, you know, path as we went across the state. And yeah, we'd still come into town and have big, you know, local shows. And I thought that was way cooler than just staying in town and being these legendary guys that would eventually burn out and not do anything with their career. I wanted something more, and that's the same thing with the comics. I want something more. Might not achieve it, but I won't stop pursuing it, and that's a fact.
So how do you branch out to those other towns in this space?
In this space, to me, it's utilizing the crowdfunding platforms that are available for you. And then eventually, after I get a certain amount of books under my belt, trying to get those into, you know, like the grassroots wave, trying to get them into LCSs or Barnes and Nobles or whatever platform might pop up that you can get the book out to, whether it's digital media, into different areas as well, and just push the book out as far as you can. And you know, if somebody notices and wants to help out, great. If not, you're doing everything yourself when it comes to promotion, advertisement, and you get out there and grind, and you utilize social media as much as you can, and just make people as aware that your character, try to get it out there. I want people to recognize the character when they see Reaper Destroyer. They might not know the character's name, they might not know the book, but they're like, I've seen that character before visually. It's a branding, you know, to really push that out there in as much as you can to try to draw people and make them want to check out what it is that you're doing.
But are there other networks though that you could you could also utilize where you're getting access to other creators' audiences and getting the book in front of them too.
I mean, that's definitely the goal, I guess, when you're talking about like this YouTube thing. I mean, if you branch out of your own spaces and try to get into other spaces and get it out there, you can, like that's not always the easiest thing to do, but you got to try, whether it's YouTube or, other social media. So there's a lot of groups in Facebook you can get into and try to kind of work your way into like those people that have no idea who you are or don't follow like the YouTube kind of personality stuff. And maybe that's another crowd you can get into. Maybe you can work your way into a bigger creators crowd and get their views. There's tons of stuff that you can explore. Really, I mean, it's just put your mind to it, talk to others, get advice, see what some other people are doing. I've got other people that are like, come on the show. We've got a different audience over here. We'll get your book out there, do that. Maybe you pick somebody up, maybe you don't, but it's just, you got to try whatever you can try. And then when it works, pound that,
Yeah. Yeah. It seems like unexplored territory. So I'm just curious.
There's tons of unexplored territory, I believe. And I think having the book out there is a big help. Like once you actually have the product out there that somebody can buy, like now that the book's going to be out after it's fulfilled, there'll be extra copies out there. You can actually start conventions are another thing. I forgot to mention that. I would like to start going to conventions, specifically, at least more locally within the area of the country that I'm at, with physical copies, because there's an entire fan base out there that have no idea really what crowdfunding is, but they might come and buy the book and follow you if they see it at a convention and they buy it there. And, so that's a way that I haven't utilized yet that I see other people doing to very, a lot of success. Like Isaac Bell, a friend of mine, he primarily gets his following through conventions, and people follow him to the crowdfunding, and then he puts books out and people, follow him over there from that. So
do you guys know who Paul Thayer is?
Yeah, Paul Thayer does. He's one of our co-hosts on the Spawn Review. Yeah, he does the same thing. He's doing a fantastic job of networking.
He went from putting out an issue a year just through conventions to now doing conventions and crowdfunding and some other website sales. Now he's doing 4 issues a year.
Yeah, he's doing it.
And he says crowdfunds aren't really like, bringing the house down, but they're a little bit extra.
Mm-hmm.
That's like Brian Polito's whole model.
Yeah, well, there you go. Yeah,
he's only making $500,000 per issue now.
Yeah,
what a bum.
Yeah,
only, but I'll lose it.
Yeah, he could be doing a little more. I mean, come on, let's be.
Yeah,
put the work in.
Try hard, Brian. Come on,
do better. All right, guys. So it was a great review, great panel. Thanks everybody for the opinions. Appreciate having you on. Appreciate it, Joe, jumping in to talk.
Thank you for having me on.
A little bit. Yeah,
and thank you for taking the time, guys. I appreciate it, and I listened to a lot of what you guys said, and I definitely appreciate the criticism, whatever it might be, critique, helpful criticism. We'll say that because it comes off critique, helpful critique. Yeah, otherwise it sounds negative. I appreciate that, and definitely listening and doing my best going forward to take a lot of other stuff in to make things better. So thank you so much. I appreciate you all.
Awesome.
You're very generous to all the haters, Joe. We appreciate it.
Hey, I think it was a great first effort, honestly. So
Thank you.
Can't wait to see what you do next.
Thank you.
All right, everybody. Have a good night, and we'll see you again real soon.